Today we're heading back to the dyno without the supercharger installed. See exactly what it makes. Let's go ahead and get started. So today we're back here at AGN Motorsports in Killeen, Texas to see what the Pilot makes without the supercharger on. Now I know I did this backwards, but a lot of you guys were requesting that I see what it makes without the supercharger. And then we go from there. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I went ahead and took the supercharger off, basically reverted it back to the naturally aspirated form, and I made sure to put it back to the factory fuel pressure regulator and put 6 used injectors in from a low mileage Pilot, and here we are. So they're about to get that car off the dyno, and we can get this puppy up there and see what it makes. Probably less horsepower. I don't know.
You took the supercharger out, actually?
Yeah. Supercharger's off of it, but I basically reverted it back to its before we put the supercharger on condition.
Well,
you know, short range.
I should make at least 300.
Yeah, to the crank. With these big old tires, though, you know. I don't know. We'll see once we get it up there. Okay, so here's the graph from before: 210 horsepower with the supercharger, 200 torque. Without the supercharger, it's 190 and 185 torque, but it is a smoother graph. With the supercharger, since we can't go through and fine tune everything, it's not going to be smooth. But Erica was saying how it's definitely on the top end. The supercharger definitely gave it a little bit more power, definitely for top end. I could tell that from before to after, so it's gonna get loud in here, so we will go over some stuff here in just a minute. All right, so we did learn a lot of information from these 2 dyno pools. The all motor setup did have a smoother graph because it's using the factory tune, versus the Apexi with the supercharged setup, which you can't really fine tune the graph and make it a smooth graph with the Apexi, at least in my experience. Maybe someone out there with pro level experience with the Apexi Neo could do it, but since they don't really make a standalone ECU setup for the Pilot, without having to spend tons of time rewiring and adapting an Accord V6 AEM in here, which I don't even know if would work because it's automatic. Either way, we got a lot of good information. It did make more horsepower and torque with the supercharged setup than the all motor setup. Now the all motor setup is definitely a smoother graph though. So if we were to be able to fine tune it, Eric even said himself.
Remember, we cannot judge this graph because you don't have injectors, you don't have a tuner. I mean, it's a lot of things missing. So
yeah, I mean,
this is the factory map from the car already, pretty much pre-tuned, set up for factory. This is you added a supercharger when you don't know what to do.
Right.
Maybe when you clean that out real good, you're gonna make that for decent power.
We should be able to get way more out of that supercharged setup. But I found something out when I was taking the supercharger out I wanted to show you, so when we get back to the house I'll show you that. So here we go. Alright, now that we're back at the house, we can go over a few things. So this naturally aspirated engine setup had a couple advantages over the supercharged setup. Let me explain real quick. The supercharged setup, when it was on here, 6 of the injectors were actually bad. 2 of them were actually stuck open. The other 2 would fire when they wanted to. We had this tested with a flow tester, and all 6 were bad. So with the supercharger on, still making 210 horsepower, that is pretty amazing for having 6 crap injectors. So I replaced the injectors and everything's good. Plus, when we took this to the dyno, it was 15 degrees cooler, so this in theory should have made more power than if we dynoed it on the same day at the same temperature as the supercharged setup. with bad injectors in it. It probably would have put 170 horsepower down. Now, the reason everyone's like, whoa, your numbers are way too low, you have to remember that the automatic transmission takes 20% of your engine's horsepower. That's just the basic standard. And then you add these big, heavy off-road tires, which are light truck tires. They hold 80 PSI in them. They're pretty heavy. Just one wheel-in tire is a lot heavier than the factory wheel-in tire, which I don't have the factory wheel-in tire, or I would have thrown them on the front just so we could have seen what it made as a stock setup. It should have been closer to like 200 horsepower or 210 with just the factory wheels and tires. But since these are heavier, it took more power to turn them. So with the supercharged setup, we should be around 250-ish with everything right. On this supercharger gasket here, I didn't notice this before, but there's a little flap here. I went ahead and trimmed it off so that way more of the air and volume can be pushed out. So that was probably definitely causing an issue. On horsepower with this gasket cut properly, the right injectors running properly, the tune, since I can't really adjust it very much, we're only going to get so much out of it, but I will be throwing the supercharger back on and dailying it with the supercharger on there. We're basically calling it good on this setup. We know everything's good. We know how much power it's making roughly now. With the supercharger, we might go back once I turn it up 4 or 5 PSI, go back, see exactly what it's putting down now that the injector issue is fixed. But I'm super happy with it either way. This is a pretty heavy vehicle, so we noticed the difference after taking the supercharger off. It definitely does not pull as hard. VTEC crossover is pretty loud. Just listen to this. The VTEC crossover, pretty intense, but it didn't seem to go anywhere, and you could feel that there wasn't as much torque. So I kind of miss having the supercharger on. But yeah, I mean, I'm super happy with how it's turning out. Also, if you guys are interested, AGN Tuning is starting up his YouTube channel. I will leave a link in the description. I'm going to start doing some editing for him. So definitely go over there and subscribe, and stay tuned because he's going to have all kinds of different vehicles on his dyno and stuff like that. But I'm going to go ahead and get off here. I just wanted to get you guys this video, let you guys know it does indeed make more power with the supercharger. Even under all the bad conditions that it had, the supercharger still made more power than the good condition setup of all motor. So I hope to see you guys in the next video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell icon on to get notified of every upload, and feel free to watch some of my videos in the playlist I've made. So see you guys in the next video. And as I like to say, God bless, stay safe, stay awesome.